Hello, everybody. Dennis Young here, podcast number 11. And mostly doing this for everybody out there that enjoys music and artists from the past and present. And I got a real special guest today, Bob Bert. And he has a big, long career in music and everything associated with punk, post punk, etc. So, Bob, nice having you on.
Thank you, Dennis.
And let's go back to where you started, like your background, how you got involved with music.
Okay, so I grew up in a town called Clifton, New Jersey, which is 10 minutes out of Manhattan. And
Okay.
so I spent most of my teenage years going into New York, and I was always a big music fan. So I started going to concerts, at like 14, in like the late
Wow.
60s. And so, so I was always on top of things. Had no plans on being a musician. I played took drum lessons for a year when I was 12, like after seeing the Beatles on it.
Oh, wow.
So, and then after going to see a lot of concerts, and I started going to clubs, and I became I was really obsessed with Andy Warhol. So I went to the School of Visual Arts, and I learned how to be a fine art silkscreen printer. And I
How
ended
about
up,
that?
and I ended up actually printing Warhol's artwork in the 80s while I was in Sonic Youth and Pussy Galore.
Wow.
And
Never knew that.
I discovered CBGB's in 1975. So I started going the first time I went there, it was Patti Smith and television, and there was like
Holy
15
smoke.
people there. And then, so I started going there into Max's, and I was working in Soho, silkscreen printing, and I got involved with this punk rock art show, which was at this gallery called Nonson on Wooster Street. And
How about that? Okay.
so that's where I met my future wife, who she was living in Jersey City. I was living in Manhattan. And when we decided to live together, we ended up in Hoboken as a compromise.
No, how about that?
So I've been here since 1981.
Okay.
And right around the time I moved here. I remember the night I moved in, I went right down to Maxwell's and saw the Bush Tetras and the Ray Beats.
How
And
about that?
yeah, and so
Speaking of that, I'm going to be speaking to Pat Place later this week from Bush
awesome,
Tetris.
excellent. I
So
love
keep
that.
going.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
so one night we were at this other place called the Beaten Path Cafe, which is long gone, and one of the bands didn't show up, and I was sitting there with my girlfriend, who ended up being my wife, who and then we were drinking, and someone said, "Hey, does anyone play the drums?" And she goes, "Yeah, Bob does." So I got up on stage and I
How
started
about that?
improvising with this other two people. One of them was this crazy, whatever, his guy named Peter Missing, who later went on to form the Missing Foundation. And so I played, that band was called Drunk Driving. And from that improvised stage thing, we ended up getting some shows. And that was the beginning of my life in a band. And then later on, that lasted about 7 months. And then I was really aware of everything that was going on. In fact, I'm a big Liquid fan.
Oh, about that. Thank you.
I still have my 99 records, and I have the Grand Royal CD with everything on it.
Oh, yeah.
And I saw you a bunch of times. And
you did. Oh, we're back in Haraz or Danceteria or the new.
Well, I saw you everywhere. I saw you at remember A's, I think it was?
Of course, right.
Yeah. Saw you there. I saw you so many times. I was being a fan of percussion. You guys,
right? Oh yeah.
In fact, I don't know if you remember, but we actually played together in Europe. Sonic Youth and Liquid Liquid did a
You know,
show.
I was going to ask you about that, if you were in the band at that time, because
Yes,
that was in Hamburg.
yes, I still have the
That was a
poster.
wild show. That was a wild show. You know, after that, we stayed in Hamburg a couple days, and our drummer Scott Hartley was possibly going to have an interview with Harry Belafonte for a movie role, which never happened. But we got to see Harry Belafonte in Hamburg about that same time, and we went backstage, and he's the greatest guy. I mean, really, a big,
Yeah,
strong, but that was that. I remember that show very, very vividly. You guys were the headlining act.
right. And one show that I'll never forget was at Maxwell's. It was Liquid Liquid and do you remember that show?
Oh, of course, right.
So it was so funny because you guys were playing and the whole place was dancing and having a great time. And then came on afterwards. And by the second song, the only people in the room were me and Ed Ballman.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's a shame. Now. Do you know Bill Ballman? You remember him?
No, I know of him, but I never met him.
Well, I'm going to be speaking to him next week, but he worked with Ed in the store. That was
Yeah,
his brother, and he was the one handling, like, he was a DJ at Haraz
right.
and the Limelight and all these clubs, and he would handle a lot of the orders that came in at the store, and so it's quite a history there.
Did you know Terry Tolkien?
Not very well.
Okay, he was quite a character. He was he was working at 99 Records around the time when the whole thing was going on with Sugar Hill Records and you guys. Right. And so he was saying that, like, he would be working the store, and then, you know, like, I guess they were sending like goons down and like hassling the place. And
yeah, who knows? I mean, I don't know if that's true. I'm not sure about the true story, because, you know, I spoke to Bill, and I'm going to ask him again and see really what happened. I know Ed ran out of money at that point, but I don't know. I don't know what the real story is there.
Well, according to Terry, who passed away a couple years ago, according to Terry, he would be working, and then I guess Ed was a little bit frightened of what was going on, so Ed would come.
Sure.
He would come in the middle of the night and take out the bag of money. You know, so.
Oh my gosh, I was never involved in much of that. You know, I lived in New Jersey at the time, so I was coming into the city, so I wasn't aware of, you know, all those happenings at that point. But it was quite crazy that they used our song. But
yeah, I run into Sal once in a while, and he was telling me the whole story too. So I guess eventually it was settled up. You know.
Yeah, and Sal's still playing. He's in this group 178 Product.
Yeah,
and
I've been
play once a month.
Yeah.
Yep, they play in Brooklyn. He plays once a month, and he brings in musicians to play with him. So anyway, let's get back to your story with Sonic Youth. How did that happen?
Well, okay, I'll go back a little further. So
okay.
So when I was working in Soho, this was 1978, and this friend that I worked with came in, and she showed me this album called No New York. And so I totally got into the whole no wave scene. And of course, by that point, you know, Teenage Jesus and Mars had already broken up, but I started to go see the Contortions a lot, and Eight-Eyed Spy, and all these bands. And I mean, that was kind of the turning point that convinced me that you didn't have to be so technically skilled. You could just have some good ideas, you know.
Right, and, exactly.
Because I was going to see all these bands, you know, people like, you know, Jerry Nolan on drums and Clem Burke, and I was just like, hey, I could never do that, you know. So eventually, so I started playing in that first band, and I was really aware of things going on. I bought all the magazines. I'd go to all the record stores all the time. And so I was reading the New York Rocker, and it had an article in there that Glenn Branca was starting a record label, and his first release was going to be this band, Sonic Youth. And so I bought the record when it came out, and I really dug it. I went to see them. You know, they had Richard Edson playing drums. I went to see them.
Oh, how about that?
Yeah, I went to see him at the Mud Club and at CBGB's. And they were still getting their act together back then because they had all these crazy guitar tunings and all these guitars. And so there would be like, you know, 5-minute gaps between every song as they're figuring out what they're playing. And Richard Edson would be sitting there like, come on, let's go.
Oh, man.
So then one day I went into that store, Rocks in Your Head, and there was a flyer on the wall that said Sonic Youth need a drummer. So I ripped it down. I still have it. And actually, so I called them up and I got in the band and I was rehearsing with them for a while. And it's funny because, you know, Thurston's book just came out and I didn't realize it until I read the book that, you know, he had made this flyer and hung it all over downtown on telephone poles and record stores and stuff. I was the only person that called.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
So I started playing with them, and right away we went on this tour down south with the Swans. And it was 10 people in a van with a U-Haul with like no seats.
Oh my gosh.
Everybody was smoking cigarettes except me. It was like
man.
It was crazy. We went down there and played to like hardly anyone, but it was quite a crazy experience. And then after that, they fired me, and then there was the second half of that tour out to the Midwest. So they got this other guy, and he played at a show at the Mud Club with Sonic Youth, and that was the night that Jeffrey Lee Pierce from the Gun Club got up and sang "I Want to Be Your Dog" at the end. And but then this guy couldn't tour, so after they fired me, they called me back, and I went and did the second tour, part of the tour. And then after that, I was let go, and they started they brought in Jim Sclavunos to replace me. And, you know, Jim Sclavunos now with Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds for the last 30 years. And
wow,
he's been in like every band, Sonic Youth, the Cramps, and Teenage Jesus, and blah, blah, blah. And so even though I wasn't in the band, I was still like hanging out in their social scene, going to see them play with Jim. And Jim only lasted a couple of months, and then he left. And during those couple of months, I was rehearsing with some musicians in Hoboken, and my skills got a lot better, you know. So at one point, I get a call from Thurston, and he's like, you know, so they recorded all of their first album, Confusion is Sex, with Jim.
Okay.
And I ended up playing on 2 songs on that album because I just did them better than he did. And so then Thurston calls me back and asked me if I want to come back and play. So I rehearsed with them, and they were pretty impressed with my improvement of skills. And then they were playing this show. It was a week-long festival at this art gallery called White Columns. It was called the
I've heard of that.
Yeah, Speed Trials. And so that was my first show back with them. And then the next day, and that, you know, there was like, everyone was on that. Swans, the Beastie Boys, Lydia Lunch, Arto Lindsay, all this stuff. And so after that, after we played the show, we went to that Ear In bar across the street. And it turned out that Thurston and Lee were leaving to tour Europe the next day with Glenn Branca. And while they were tour. Yeah, and so while they were over there, they were setting up the very first Europe Sonic Youth tour. And so they were asking me if I would go to Europe, and I just like kind of said, well, you know, you have to promise me it's not going to cost me a penny, and you're not going to fire me when you get
right in the middle of a tour, right?
Or when we get back. So So yeah, so we did that, and that first tour of Europe was so crazy. I mean, they had set it up themselves, but it wasn't like a real tour. Like there'd be like one show, and then 4 days later another show,
Right.
and we didn't even have a van. We were traveling around with Euro passes with 13 guitars and cymbals,
Wow.
all this stuff, passing all these guitars in these beat up cases through windows of trains and all that stuff, and so yeah, so that was it. And then I just stayed on with them. I went to Europe with them 3 times. I recorded the Kill Your Idols EP. I recorded the Bad Moon Rising album, which is still selling well today, 40 years later.
Wow. That's great.
And just recently, in 1987, I quit the band in 1985, and I took a little time off, and then I joined the band Pussy Galore.
I've heard of them.
Yeah, so I was playing in Pussy Galore, but I was playing like this crazy drum kit that had like a bass drum and a car gas tank on top of it and all this metal percussion.
Oh, wow.
So I stayed through the rest of the 80s with them and made a bunch of albums with them, and toured Europe with them. And so just like 3 weeks ago in 1987, the label that Sonic Youth were on put out this like official bootleg record, and it was like one album. It was a double album. One album was Steve just joined after he just joined Steve Shelley after he just joined playing in Brighton Beach, and the other album is one of the last shows I played with Sonic Youth.
Okay.
And it was at the Hammerstein Palais, opening up for Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds on their very first tour.
How about that?
So
wow.
So this bootleg came out that the band was upset about because the label put it out without really, the label thought they were surprising them. They would have some money for them, but they want creative control over everything they did. So this album came out and they were pissed about it. I was happy because it totally documented me at my best playing at the show. Oh,
that's good.
So it's like really kick ass. And so Steve Shelley, their drummer, he puts out all their he reissues all their records now. So he put this record out, and it's very, now it's like a double album, colored vinyl, cassettes, CDs, the whole shebang, and it's selling like crazy. So I'm
great. Wow.
Really happy about that. And so
that, it's so hard as an independent artist like myself to sell records these days or anything, unless you have a big name. And Sonic Youth had always had a name, and they've been around forever. So anything they do, you have a base right there, a fan base.
Exactly. And I would have never imagined, like, in 1985 or whatever, we were just like this, Lower East Side noise band. And it's kind of like, you don't envision the future like, hey, a couple years from now, there's going to be 120 minutes on MTV and alternative music. And like, I would have never imagined in my wildest dreams back then that we'd still be talking about Sonic Youth today.
Well, I got to say the same thing about Liquid. I mean, we never looked into the future like this far into the future, 40 years later. And then we didn't even look to being in the dance market. Yeah. We never we were never, I felt, the dance music band. And then all of a sudden, after Cavern came out, and Ed was a genius about marketing and how to put records together at that point, we were doing these dance shows in New York. Yeah. So you never know what's going to happen. Yeah. It's really strange.
I love
we all made an impact back then, everybody. It just had that, it was a caught in time period.
Exactly.
Where everything was so exciting happening.
Exactly.
And now, what about Bewitched? What was that about?
Okay, so so after I left Sonic Youth, Thurston was doing an interview with one of the British papers, and he just made up this story that I had a solo band called Bewitched with their sound woman, Suzanne Sasek. And so I took the opportunity and just ran with it, and I went into War and Tears, and I made an experimental record, and you know, at the time I was very influenced by like Big Stick and the Butthole Surfers, and
Oh, they were great.
yeah, so and then eventually that turned into a band, and so we, you know, we had got this offer to open up for Spacemen 3 at Maxwell's, and so I said, "Oh, all right." So I got a band together with a bunch of guys around town and stuff, and it turned out Spacemen 3 couldn't get into the country. So
Oh boy.
we played our first show with this band STP, which was an all-girl band featuring Julie K. Fritz from Pussy Galore, Sally Barry from the Honeymoon Killers, and Jackie Nimitz, and this girl Melissa. And so our very first show was playing with them at Maxwell's. That was like 1990. And then Kim and Thurston came to the show. And this is right when Sonic Youth signed with Geffen, and they made their big major label debut record. And so they took both of us to go on tour with them. So we toured.
Okay.
We toured the East Coast. I actually sang at Roseland, which still blows my mind.
How about that? Wow.
You know? And so, and then we were supposed to go out and do the West Coast and Midwest on the tour, but we got bumped off for some band called Nirvana.
How about that? Wow. How about that?
Yeah.
That's really something. Did you ever see them play before they got big, Nirvana?
Yeah, I saw them at the Pyramid, and I saw them at Maxwell's.
The Pyramid. Wow. We played there, the three-piece Liquid.
Yeah.
Before we broke up. In fact, I have a video up of Dig We Must. It's not a good quality, but it's, I think, the only video we have of the three-piece Liquid version back in 84, 85. How about that? The Pyramid Club. That's amazing.
Are you still playing today?
Well, not the band, but I'm still making music.
Oh, that's cool.
I put up all types of music. I put on Bandcamp, and so it varies each record. I never do the same thing twice. So doing acoustic records, electronic music, you know, just a lot of things to keep busy. But
So-
that's something. So
Yeah.
Bewitched was around through what, 1990 or so?
It started off in 1990. We did a few tours, and then it kind of fell apart. And I think I did a Sub Pop single of the month after that. And then in the 90s, I started playing with this band, the Chrome Cranks.
Okay.
They were like a fuzzy garage rock swampy band. And we went to Europe. Ended up playing with them for like 7 years. That was also with Jerry Teal, who was in the band The Honeymoon Killers. And he also had a great recording studio on 4th Street right near Avenue B called The Fun House. And it was great to like be in a band that had a place where you could record and rehearse.
Right. Oh, yeah. That's
know.
a big plus.
Yeah.
Those record recording studio prices, they can knock you out, especially like $30, $40, $50 an hour.
Yeah.
And you're a band that wants to keep trying things. You're not set to what you want to do.
Yeah.
It can drain your money pretty quick. So that helps.
Yeah. So I played with them, and then they fell apart. I don't know, maybe like 98. And then out of the ashes of the Chrome Cranks came this band, the Knoxville Girls, which had Kid Congo playing.
Oh, I remember them.
Yeah. So that went on, and then the 2000s I was kind of floundering, and then the last 10 years I was I was touring the world with Lydia Lunch Retrovirus.
How about that? Wow. So did you get over to Japan and Australia, all those places?
I've only been to Japan twice, and that was once with Pussy Galore, and then a few years ago with John Spencer and the Hitmakers.
Oh.
But with Lydia, I that's one thing. I had never been to Australia. I went to Australia 3 times with her. Went
Oh,
to
wow.
went to Brazil a couple times. Went to Colombia. We played in Moscow.
You played in Moscow.
Yeah,
Wow. And
and
this was, these were paid gigs that you were getting, they were taking care of everything as far as the
yeah. I mean,
travel and the hotel.
it was a retrospective of Lydia's music career. So we were playing
Hmm.
songs from Teenage Jesus, Eight Eyed Spy,
Wow.
all her bands, and it was a great show. It was also Weasel Walter was a guitar player, and Tim Dahl was the bass player, and it was a great time. I have to say that was the most fun I ever had playing in a band.
How about now? Were people showing up? Did you have decent crowds for this kind
Yeah,
of?
Lydia is like an icon.
She is.
And yeah, they were, the shows were amazing, and we were a great live band. We were playing all these songs that some of them have never been played live before at
How
all,
about that?
so yeah, it was
Did,
that was really cool. And then towards the end of that, uh, I hooked up with John Spencer again, and did back on the metal percussion. And then he started he started going out on the road with him, and that was like 221 shows we
oh
played.
my gosh, is that recently?
Yeah,
221?
that ended
Wow.
that
I could,
ended in February of 2023 was that was
holy smoke. Wow, I couldn't do that now. I mean, that's amazing. You got a lot of stamina there to be on these tours. I mean, did you have days off in between, or you're playing
well,
one?
the thing is that after in the 2000s, I didn't play. I played in bands, like just practicing and stuff, but I didn't do any touring because my wife was very ill, so I had to take care of her.
Okay.
And then she passed away in 2012. And
Okay.
right after she passed away, that's when I got the call from Lydia,
Okay.
who I met. I met Lydia Lunch at the very first show I played with Sonic Youth, which was at CBGB, November.
Wow.
November. I'm looking at the poster on the wall. November 3rd of 1982.
Wow. How about that?
Yeah,
And she's still playing music, right, Lydia?
she's the hardest working woman in showbiz. She's still doing music. She just like goes out and does stuff, whether it's spoken word or collaborating with other people. Like right now, she's, I think, just got back from Australia, and she's in the Northwest or California or somewhere. She works constantly.
I'd love to get an interview with her, but she's probably really too busy or
Well,
whatever. And
she has her own podcast, and that
oh,
goes
she does. Okay.
every Friday. It's called The Lydian Spin.
I got to look that up.
Yeah, every week she has a great interview with some artist. Like I think the recent one is Meredith Monk.
Oh, I know her. Right. Wow.
So
So she's able to get, she's got a big name out there. So you're going to attract really good guests.
yeah, totally. She can
I
get
just
anything she wants.
started this. So, I've had 10 really good podcasts. You're the 11th. You remember Tim Summer?
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Well, I had just interviewed him last week, and it was a fantastic interview.
Oh, that's cool.
You should check it out. Yeah, he's a great guy. And I remember the Village Voice, and there was a guy, Robert Christgau, and he never liked us.
Yeah.
I don't think he could never relate to any of our stuff.
This is so funny. I have the same kind of thing with Robert Christgau. He actually wrote one time that Sonic Youth became a good band the day Steve Shelley joined.
Oh man.
But it's so funny that you brought him up, because I went to a show last night at this place called Sony Hall in Midtown Manhattan. I went to see my friends, the Sadies, play.
Okay.
And they had John Langford and Sally Timms from the Mekons playing with them, and Robert Christgau was there. He was sitting.
How about that? That's funny.
I was like,
world.
holy shit, that guy, he's right here.
I mean, nothing personal against the guy, but when we played, he always had who was playing that week, but never gave us a good review to, hey, go see this band.
No,
he couldn't relate to our music at all. I don't know.
Well, yeah, and I'd never liked his music journalism anyway. There was times where I would buy an album and I'd be like, wow, this is the greatest thing ever. And then he'd like next week in The Voice, he'd give it like a C plus or some shit.
Right, right. Well, he was into that old time, that rock and roll, from I guess from the 70s. I don't know what his tastes were, but certainly wasn't post-punk stuff.
Yeah,
That's for
exactly.
sure.
Exactly.
I don't know, but Tim worked for him, and he said he was a great guy to work for. But I guess
that's cool.
when you're a writer, you could just have your own taste here. You could put anybody down. That's the way it is. Your own personal feeling.
Totally.
So what's your setup now? Do you have you say you have this metal type of percussion?
That ended with John Spencer, and so right now I'm kind of all that touring that I did for the last 11 years is kind of over, and so I just did a solo show. I have a weird percussion setup with a marimba and a big bass drum on a stand and all this stuff, and I put on this show at this Two Bridges luncheonette, and it actually went over pretty well. It's like I'm doing all these percussion things, but I'm also singing a few songs with percussion, like like cover songs, like I do Mississippi Queen and
how about that?
A couple other things, and to my it wasn't something I was thinking about actively pursuing. But the show went over well and everyone really dug it. And from that, I got more shows. I have a show next Sunday at Mama Tried. It's an afternoon show. And then I got another show after that in May. But in Hoboken, I have a practice space. So I can go there anytime. Do you remember the band Live Skull?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, Mark C. from Live Skull, he's like my best friend. So we share a practice space, forever. And so I'm going to actually, tomorrow, I'm going to go there and get my whole setup going and practice for the show. And then Wednesday and Thursday, I'm going to record there and just get it down on tape. Maybe eventually make some kind of solo record out of it, but just at this point, just get it on tape and see where I'm going. And then I have the show on Sunday. So
now, do you have a label right now you're using, or you just put it out independently, digitally, or how do you?
The one label that I'm very associated with is In the Red Records.
I don't know them.
Yeah, they're from California, and they put out the Knoxville Girls records. They put out a Live Pussy Galore record. There's another band I forgot to mention that was like a side project. It's me, Kid Congo Powers, and Mick Collins of the Dirt Bombs and the Gories.
Wow.
It's called the Wolf Manhattan Project. And we recorded 2 albums, and they both came out on In the Red. And we've been wanting to play together, but unfortunately our schedules are never clicking up. Like right now, Kid Congo's touring Australia with his band, and the Gories are going over to Europe and pretty soon. So, hopefully at some point in time, we have done about like maybe 10 shows locally, in the 10 years we've sort of been
right. Well, I've found with the labels, though, I've been on different independent labels. They'll put out for me 1 record and that's it.
Yeah.
And that's it. And then you never hear from them again, or you can't reach anybody. So I've been through that now, I think about 4 or 5 independent labels.
Oh, I've been through that at least 4 or 5.
Right? And it's just one and done.
Yeah.
So at this point, I just said, to heck with it. I'm just going to put everything out on Bandcamp, and if there's really interest, then maybe I'll put it out on CD. I had a Japanese connection at one time, Disc Union. That kind of just faded out. So at this point, I'm just going to add to my catalog, and who knows. But it's amazing. You're still so busy. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I guess.
Great.
Yeah, I'm very, very, very fortunate. And, It's unbelievable.
It is. Now, the last thing we'll go over, what about this book you have? You said you have a book, right?
I have a book. It's called "I'm Just a Drummer: My Time with Sonic Youth and Chrome Cranks and Pussy Galore." And I in the '90s I put out a fanzine with my wife called BB Gun, and there's a lot of stuff from there in the book. I interviewed so many people, and so yeah, at the current moment, it's out of print. There's 2 pressings that sold out. It's Hozak Books, and they're going to reprint it again this year, I believe. So I'm really
I got to get a copy of that.
Happy. Yeah, I wish I had something to give you.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to get together and jam with you someday. That might be fun.
Sure.
I'll bring my marimba down. I haven't played in a while, and just have a fun time jamming.
Right. But you were the drummer in Liquid.
No, I was the marimba player.
You were the percussionist.
Yep. The rototoms, I had marimba, all these assorted instruments. Yeah, the drummer was Scott Hartley.
Okay. Oh, I was a little confused there.
Okay. No, but I was marimba and rototoms. So, and we had bass, of course. Sal played various percussion, and Scott drummer.
And how did you guys get together? Are you all from Jersey?
Well, basically we're all from Jersey. Eventually those guys moved into the city. Richard now lives out of New York now. Scott, I think he's in upstate New York. Sal's the only one still in the city.
Yeah.
And I'm in New Jersey still. And I have a little home studio here. So we just keep busy. I have this little band, Primitive Substance. So we do occasional shows. And we jam a lot. We're always changing instruments. So we're just having fun with it at this point.
That was really cool. Like a couple of years ago when you were, were you on Letterman or somewhere? Where did I see you guys?
We got on Jimmy Fallon.
Jimmy Fallon, yeah. That's a great clip. And then you played outside. I watched that all the time on YouTube.
What's that, Lincoln Center?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We played with Reese Chatham.
Right.
Oh, that was crazy. He had all those guitars. It was wild. But that was a good show. So we ended up at Madison Square Garden. That was our last gig.
Oh my God!
Opening for LCD Sound System.
Wow!
But we only had a 15-minute set. That was it.
Yeah, but still, you could go to your grave saying,
"I know."
To the garden.
What a way to end our career, right?
Yeah, totally.
That was amazing. I mean, even though people were still coming in, I was a little annoyed. We had to start exactly at 8 and all that. But after time has gone by, I'm saying to myself, wow, what a way to end Madison Square Garden. Who would have thought that? Starting out, playing at Tier 3.
Right.
That was one of our first shows, was Tier 3.
Right.
We went to Hurrahs after that. And then after that, we just kept playing like big clubs. Because Ed had a lot of connections at that point.
Yeah. I mean,
he was a big shining star in the whole area there. 99 Records was a hot little label.
No, I know. I used to go in there all the time, and I bought all those records. I used to like, that one ESG record he put out where the second side is live.
Yeah.
I used to play that and try to drum to it all the time.
They were great. In fact, we had a reunion show with them in 2003 in Detroit. That was like the first and last time we played with them. Nice. That was a really amazing night. It was outside.
And now it's like mostly the daughters, right?
Well, yeah. I think there's only one left, Renee, and she's got daughters or in the band. I don't know. I don't follow them too much these days, but they're still playing. And we ended. I don't know if we're going to ever play again. I doubt it, but who knows? Is what it is. But we were very lucky to have 99 Records and be where we were at that time, because I think it was exciting.
Totally.
So Bob, where can we find you on you have a YouTube channel, or do you have where can we find your music? Even on the web.
Yeah, I mean, you could Google me on YouTube with any number of the bands I've been in. there's like lots of, some of the bands are where actually made videos, and
Fantastic.
it's, that was the one thing when YouTube came around. It was just like, wow, I could watch myself, playing with Sonic Youth and like in Italy.
Sure.
And it's like all this stuff that like, I mean,
It's overwhelming.
Sonic Youth did this. One of the shows I played with them was this very famous show in the Mojave Desert. And,
oh, wow.
And there's this documentary out called Desolation Center, and they put on this group put on all these shows out in the middle of the desert, and it was like our show was like Sonic Youth, Red Cross, the Meat Puppets. And,
I remember them. Right.
Yeah. And
what
so,
year was that?
1985, and our whole set is on YouTube. It's great.
Oh, wow. But you actually went to Mojave Desert. That's amazing.
Yeah, the middle of the desert, a full moon. Like,
wow. That can't be that. That's amazing.
And everyone had to take weird buses to get there. And then we get there, and like, it turns out that like everyone's tripping on acid. And I'm like, this is 1985. People are still taking this stuff.
That's unbelievable. Wow. You think we're in Haight-Ashbury or something?
2024 and people are still taking it.
I'm sure they are. That is amazing. Wow. Well, listen, it's been a pleasure having you on.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, anytime. I mean, we'll have to gather in place sometime.
So where does this go? You put this up on YouTube, you said?
Well, yeah. We have a YouTube channel. Everybody, it's called Primitive Substance.
Okay.
And if you look, it's going to be on probably tomorrow. But we have music on there. Plus, I started a podcast sub channel on it.
Okay.
And I'm going to keep doing this as long as I see how long it goes.
Yeah.
But it's just been fun talking to everybody and seeing where everybody was at that time and now. And everybody has a great story.
Yeah.
And you're one of them.
Thanks. I'm sure Pat Place will have some great stories.
Oh, I'm sure. So anyway, it was nice talking to you.
Nice. Thank you, Dennis.
Okay. Keep the music going. I'm glad you're still playing.
Thank you. You too, baby.
Take care now. Nice seeing you.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.